So Xilonen is getting her second rerun in the next banner, but a lot has changed since she was released back in like 5.2. We have a completely new meta right now. You have new main DPSs, new supports, and even new reactions with the whole not crime meta. In this video, I'll just be reassessing Xilonen's value, and I'll be telling you guys, should you wish for Xilonen depending on your account or not. Before we continue that though, if you're trying to get Xilonen or any of her constellations, I would recommend getting your Genesis crystals from LDshop.gg. LDshop is a cheap, fast, and safe game top-up website that offers top-ups for many games, including Genshin Impact. As you guys can see here, these are the offers they have for Genshin, and all of them are cheaper than the official game store, up to 30% cheaper. For example, you can see that 3,280 Genesis crystals offer. It costs $50 on the official game store, but it only costs $37.39 on LDshop. That's $12.61 or more than 25% saved just by using LDshop. They also have many other things like bundles, character outfits, Welkins, and stuff like that. When you want to buy, you just want to click on the offer you want to choose. For example, I'm going to buy the 300 Genesis crystals offer. You just need to enter your server region and user ID. Obviously, make sure they're right. Then you just want to click on top up, choose your payment method, enter your details, and pay. And shortly after that, you're just going to get the Genesis crystals on your account. And right now, if you use my link, you can get a 15% off coupon, also an extra 5% off. That can save you up to $50. They also have more cool things on the website. For example, if you spend more than $80 in a month, you can win a free Welkin. Just go check it out yourself. Click the link in the description or the pinned comment and top up now. Alright, so back to Xilonen very quickly, we're gonna explain what she does so we understand why she's good in the first place. So basically, in short, Xilonen is gonna have 3 samplers around her. They're gonna start off as being Geo, but their element is gonna change depending on the teammates you have on her teams. So if you have a Pyro, Electro, Hydro, or Cryo teammate, the shards around her are gonna change depending on these teammates. So she has 3. Depending on the 3 other teammates, the shards are gonna change colors. The Geo ones will always be active, and then you can activate the other ones by getting enough Night Soul points from your Ascension passive. When the samples are active, it's just gonna lower the elemental resistance to your opponents to the elements that you have the samples in. So let's say, for example, you have a Geo sample, a Pyro sample, and then a Hydro sample, then your opponent's Hydro, Pyro, and Geo resistance is gonna be lowered when Xilonen's samples are active. That's the main part of her kit, is just her elemental skill, and what it does is basically just resistance shred. A huge amount of resistance shred, usually it's gonna be like 30 up to 36% at level 10, which is pretty achievable, and that's gonna be pretty good, obviously. Also, when you activate these samples, they're gonna last for 15 seconds, which is also super good. This duration is gonna be enough to cover most of main DPS's rotations, so it's gonna give you resistance shred pretty easily. You just need to have the teammates on your team, and then basically just normal attack with Xilonen, and then you're gonna have the resistance shred. The good thing about that is that you don't need to swirl the right elements, because with the Nemo characters, with the Verdescent, they can also give you resistance shred, but then you'll also need to swirl elements, and it can be pretty complicated, and you might not always get it right. But with Xilonen, you just need to have the teammates elements in your team, activate your skill, normal attack a little bit, and then you have the resistance shred pretty easily. So that's a pretty good part about Xilonen. She provides you with pretty easy and cheap resistance shred. Now for elemental bursts, it's just gonna either heal you when you have 2 different elements in your team that are Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, or Electro, or if you have a full Geo team or close to it. In that case, she's just gonna give you damage, and you can use her as a sub DPS, which is usually not recommended because her personal damage is not that great. So she can heal you and then give you resistance shred. Her passive skills are not really anything special, they just help her gain the Night Soul points for you to activate your elemental skill, and then also give her some extra defense. That's gonna boost her healing and damage a little bit. And talking about defense and what she scales with, this is probably one of the best things about Xilonen also, is that her resistance shred doesn't really scale with anything. It's just gonna be hard coded into your elemental skill, so just upgrading your elemental skill level is gonna give you enough resistance shred. Other than that, really, you don't need anything. You just need defense, because your healing is gonna scale with defense. So if you care about healing, you can build some defense. If not, then you literally don't need to build your Xilonen. Maybe you'll need some energy recharge to burst on uptime again if you need your healing, but other than that, she's really easy and cheap to build. Honestly, you don't even need to build her in the first place. Just stack as much defense and energy recharge as you can. You can use the Favonius with her, something like that, if you don't have her signature, and that's it. You really don't need anything else for Xilonen. She's just gonna give you the resistance shred just from using her elemental skill, so you don't really need to care about any stats. That makes her a pretty easy and simple character to build, also pretty versatile, and she can give you resistance shred, which is super valuable and hard to get, and that's what made Xilonen a pretty good support and a pretty universal one. Her Constellations are just going to amplify that even more. Her C1 is just basically interruption to resistance, because Xilonen as a sustain doesn't really give any interruption to resistance at C0. So if you don't have a shielder on your team, it can be a little hard to play. But with C1, she can give you interruption to resistance, and she obviously can heal you, so she's going to become like a full sustain sort of, and that's going to be pretty good. C2 is obviously her best constellation. It's just going to give you more buffs depending on what elements you have active in your samples. So if it's Geo, it's going to give you 50% increased damage. If it's Pyro, 45% increased attack, 45% increased HP for Hydro, 60% increased crit damage with Cryo, and then 25% energy for Electro, and also decreases the elemental burst cooldown. As you can see, all of these are going to be pretty valuable usually for characters of these elements. Most Pyro characters scale pretty well with attack, most Hydro scale pretty well with HP, and so on. So C2 is just going to amplify her a lot, and it's one of the best constellations in the game in my opinion. Other than that, the rest of her constellations are not really that good in my opinion. C4 is just extra damage on your normal attacks for the main character, and then C6 can turn her into some sort of main DPS usually, but she's not that good at that. So I wouldn't really recommend going anywhere above C2 in my opinion. If you had Xilonen already, you can go C1, C2. Other than that, I'd say just stop. So yeah, as you guys saw, she's going to give you pretty good buffs. At C0, it's just a resistance shred with a lot of healing, and if you have up to C2, she can give you a good variety of buffs that are probably going to benefit your main character. That's going to make her a pretty good support and best in slot in a lot of teams, especially teams with main DPSs that are going to be elemental damage dealers. Whether it's Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo, any teams that have a main DPS that deals elemental damage consistently, they're probably going to benefit from Xilonen. That makes her the best support in what's probably the best team in the game. So you can play her with like Moika, somebody like Bennett, Setlali, and then you can use Xilonen. Xilonen is just pretty much going to be a resistance shred applier in this team, and she's going to be pretty good at that. She's also going to be sustaining you a little bit besides Bennett, and that's also pretty good. And most importantly, she's going to be helping out Moika with the Night Soul stacks, because she's also a Natlin character that uses Night Soul points. Obviously, also she works best with Natlin elemental main DPSs because she can provide them with Night Soul points and stuff like that, and that's probably the best use case for Xilonen. But other than that, I said you can use her in many teams as long as you have an elemental main DPS. So you can have something like Nuviet, for example, and then Farina, and then somebody like Moika as a sub DPS even, and then Xilonen is also a support there. She's going to be providing you that Hydro resistance shred, more HP to Nuviet and Farina if you have her C2, and then also some healing and resistance to interruption if you have her C1. And again, I stress like a 30 or 36% resistance shred is going to be super valuable in teams like this. Resistance shred is kind of like a rare stat to have, and she applies it pretty easily without you needing to do anything pretty much. So she's definitely going to be super valuable in these teams. You can use her with someone like Arlecchino, for example. You can use Arlecchino, Bennett, and then let's say Jean-Li for interruption, and then Xilonen. You can remove Jean-Li if you have Xilonen at C1 because she's going to help you with interruption. If not, then you can use Jean-Li and then Xilonen. Two of her samples are going to be Pyro samples. You can activate them, and then she's going to provide Pyro resistance shred to Arlecchino, which is super good. She's also going to help her with her healing, and that's also super good. Another example is like Cryo main DPS, like Grizzly, for example. You can use like Grizzly, Shenhe, any other support. Let's say somebody like even Kaza, for example, and then Xilonen. That's also going to be super good and super valuable. But yeah, you can go for Hydro main DPS. Obviously, you can use her with Milani, especially as a Natlin character. It's going to be pretty good. So you can use like Milani, Moika as a sub DPS, let's say Kazo, and then Xilonen. Obviously, we can go on and on. But as I said before, if your main DPS deals elemental damage, that's Pyro, Electro, Hydro, or Cryo, then Xilonen probably can work in this team because she simply is just going to give you a resistance threat to that element just by her existing and being there and you using your elemental skill. Now, moving on to the most important part about this video probably, which is future value or her place in the meta at this point in the game right now. Most of the previous teams that I said are like the main best teams for her, but they're older teams sort of. They're either from Natlin or Fontaine main DPSs, but with the current meta right now, non-Cry and Lunar reactions meta, can Xilonen be good here? Honestly, I'd also say yes. Lunar damage in general, like Lunar Charge or anything like that, is gonna scale with resistance. It's also gonna have a resistance multiplier as you guys can see here. And usually that resistance multiplier is going to be for the elements that this reaction is going to be dealing with. For example, if it's Lunar Charge, then it's going to be for the Electro resistance. So Xilonen being able to reduce that resistance of enemies is going to be super good and valuable. That means even for characters that deal Lunar damage, and especially if we consider her with C2, where she gives them more and more buffs, then she's definitely going to be super good and valuable. For example, if we take a look at Flynn's, Xilonen can definitely work in his team. So for example, you can have Flynn's, Inefa, and then Ino, and Xilonen can work there because she's simply just going to be providing you with elemental resistance shred and also healing, which is pretty good. Now, she might not be the best option, especially compared to someone like Sucrose, because Sucrose can also give you elemental mastery, which is probably more valuable, but she can work as like a filler support if you don't have Sucrose built, or if you don't want to build her, you don't have her, whatever. So Xilonen can definitely work with some not crying main DPSs. If we look at the upcoming Zibai, for example, pretty good team for her is probably just going to be Zibai and then double Hydro for you to trigger the Lunar Crystallize. So let's say Columbina and then somebody like Furina, for example, or Ino or whatever. And then you can add Xilonen here too. With a double Hydro team, she's going to be able to activate her samples, and then she's going to be giving you Geo and Hydro resistance shred to the whole team. She's going to be super valuable and good here. If you have her at C2, then she even can give damage bonus to Zibai, and that's going to be pretty valuable. A 50% Geo damage bonus is probably going to be pretty good. Now, I'm not sure if that's going to buff Zibai's Lunar Crystallized damage. I think we need to check that, but even if not, then she can buff her other damage and it's still going to be pretty valuable. So she can work in at least 2/3 of like the reaction teams that we're getting in the game right now, the Lunar reactions. She can work probably with Lunar Charge main DPSs, even future ones, and she can probably work with Lunar Crystallized main DPSs. Obviously, she cannot work with Lunar Bloom main DPSs because it's just Dendro and she doesn't really buff Dendro, but that's okay, it's just a blind spot for her. But in terms of like her being active in the current meta, I'd say yeah. She might not be the best support for a lot of those main DPSs, but she's definitely still alive and can work with them for sure. She's probably going to be like an A tier support, I would say, for most of their teams. So yeah, her teams definitely do not conflict with the new Lunar main DPSs. I'd say she works pretty decently on them, especially as more of like a generalist support. And that's been sort of like her main job from the start. So I don't think it changed now, and I don't think it's probably going to change in the future. Xilonen is probably still going to be pretty valuable for a lot of teams, especially with Snezhnaya coming out next year and us getting more cryo main DPSs. She's probably still going to be pretty valuable with them because she can provide that cryo resistance shred, and that's always going to be good. So for the final conclusion, should you pull for Xilonen right now? I would say honestly, yes, go for it. As I explained, she's probably going to be pretty valuable in the future as like a generalist support. Now, she might not be the best support in every single team, obviously, but she can definitely be an A tier or at least B tier support in a lot of teams in the game. Now, if you have a certain DPS in mind that you really like and you know you're going for him for sure, let's say for example, you want Flynn's in the future and you'd want to like fully maximize him because you love him so much, you'd want to make him your main DPS for a very long time. In that case, Xilonen is obviously not going to be the best option because you can go for better supports, or you can go for like C6 Sucrose, for example, when you build her, something like that, and that's pretty understandable. But if you don't really have a clear idea on what you want in the future, and you just want a pretty good support on your account that's probably going to be pretty valuable in a lot of different teams, then Xilonen is definitely a pretty good option for that. You can even change up her artifacts and use a set like Noblesse, for example, and she can start giving you attack, and then you can make her even more universal if outside of like Natlan teams. So yeah, if you don't have a clear idea in general about what you want, and you just want a good support that you know is still going to be pretty valuable for a pretty good amount of time down the line, I'd say yeah, you should go for Xilonen. She's not going to lose her value. She's still one of the best supports in the game, especially generalist supports, and I do think her value is pretty good. But yeah, that was the video, guys. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.